Hi, my name's Tom Bonnet, and I'm an English teacher at Central High School. I'm standing in front of my wicker poster because in a little bit you're going to be watching my students in small group discussions engaged in an activity where they're sharing out their records of thinking. A record of thinking is a form that I've devised after reading this book by Chris Tovani. It's Do I Really Have to Teach Reading? She came up with the idea that since good readers revisit text in order to develop meaning and make connections to the text, that they continuously go back, reread, revisit, and in addition to that, they have a high degree of metacognitive skills. I think that one thing that all of us, regardless of what subject we teach, but especially English, we run into a problem with our kids. They don't realize that they already possess metacognition because a lot of times they're not asked to think deeper. They're not put in situations where they have to prove that they're thinking. This is why this form, again, I piggybacked it off of the double entry journal from Do I Really Have to Teach Reading, where Chris Tovani had her students write down a passage that they thought was interesting. And then in the next column, they wrote down any observation that they might have had, a prediction that they might have had, a question that they may have had as they read that text, any confusion because there's a contradiction in the character's actions. And so that thought occurred to them, and it often does. You know, these kids are smarter than they think they are. We need to put them in situations where they can realize they are as smart as we think they are. And in order to do that, what really facilitates this process is if you basically tell them, as you read, I need you to fill out the thought that you had that was significant, and do this right away. The thought goes right away, because the minute they don't do the thought, what they end up doing is forgetting it. They need to remember the exact thought as it popped into their head and they had that aha moment. Even if it's a question, whatever they deem significant, they need to immediately strike while the iron's hot and write the thought down. And this is what Chris Tovani taught me in Do I Really Have to Teach Reading? The double entry journal goes a long way towards helping kids refine their metacognitive skills. And remember, the metacognition that takes place oftentimes when they're sitting in our class, it's very covert. We can't see it. We don't know the great thoughts that are generated. For that matter, we don't know if any thoughts are being generated at all. Because we're putting them in a situation where they have to prove that they were thinking, they are revisiting the text. The next day, or whenever you feel it's appropriate, they complete the last column where they take all of their thoughts from the previous reading and they share out with the people in their discussion group, number one, what they were reading when the thought occurred to them. And they direct everybody to the page, and they direct everyone to the exact passage. They read it, and then they share out with the group. This is why I thought this was interesting. This is what I thought when I read it. I predict this will happen. Or this was confusing to me because the character seems to be changing. Anything at all that they deemed was thought-provoking. I need to see evidence that the students actually developed a conversation, an academic conversation that went deep below the surface. And this conversation was documented. That's basically what you're going to be seeing. What I had them read was 20 pages from Fahrenheit 451 to lessen the chance of kids completely getting off task. What I build into the protocol of this discussion is after you share your passage, after you share why it was interesting, and you feel like you have talked about it, this passage and the thought attached to it enough that you can document it and prove to me that you did have an academic conversation, then just tell the people in your group, okay, I have enough, thank you. And while you're documenting and paraphrasing the conversation, the next kid to your right or your left is actually doing the same thing you just got done doing, sharing the passage, and everybody's going to that page number, and everybody's finding the exact passage and reading it, following along while you read it. And then you're sharing out your thinking on that passage, why it was interesting for whatever reason. They might be halfway through this conversation and another student still documenting his or her conversation. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I believe a lot of times these kids again, they can multitask to the point, we don't give them credit for how much they can multitask. They can definitely listen to the next passage and why it was interesting to their fellow student while they're documenting a conversation that they just got done having a couple minutes ago. They can do it. I've seen it. So that's really about it. What you'll be seeing, again, is small group discussions that very much apply to all the Wicker standards that we value so much in this district. The kids have already read a set number of pages. They've already written out passages that were interesting to them for whatever reason. There's a high degree of collaboration and sharing of ideas as kids revisit passages, as well as a high degree of inquiry-based thinking. I ask students all the time, like, what do you like about this activity? Because kids seem to really take to it. And they say, I like it because I didn't understand a specific passage and why it was significant to the story. If I let a passage go by that was totally confusing to me, or for that matter, if I let a passage go by unchecked that I don't document because I was all over it and I truly understood the significance and I had that aha moment, and I don't share that out with other students, I'm less inclined to remember it later on when I'm writing my essay. It's a really fun way to allow kids to share their thinking and prove to themselves that they're smarter than they may think they are. They like to help each other out. I like to see that in my classroom.
My passage is on page 44, near the top, and it says, and he remembered thinking then that if she died, he was certain he wouldn't cry. And what I thought about that was, like, why wouldn't he cry? Like, that's his wife, like, if he was willing, both of them were willing to spend the rest of their lives together, and he, he wouldn't care if she died. And, even if it wasn't his wife, if it was just, somebody that, that you're supposed to love, why wouldn't you cry? And then, there was also the thing with, the dandelion, how Clarice told him, if it did that, it meant he wasn't in love, and she told him, that it did what it did, and she said that he wasn't in love, and he kind of, got defensive about it. But then when he says this, it kind of seems like he's, doesn't really care anymore that he's not in love with his wife, because he's just realizing what, the world became when they, started burning the books and everything.
I was kind of thinking that it's weird to me because supposedly the government wants them to be happy and they think they're happy, but then at the same time they don't for example, he doesn't know when him and his wife met, he wouldn't care if she died or anything. So how does that turn into happiness? You know what I mean? It's surprising that they think they're happy and the government makes them think that, but they're not. I don't know. I just think it's weird.
He's if I may speak up, he's kind of, in a way, ever since he found out about whatever the heck is going on, and he found out a little bit about it, he kind of lost that spark in the relationship, because he doesn't even know what's there, what's holding it together, what's making it a marriage, And the fact that they don't even know where they met, that's surprising, because most marriages would know that if they were truly happy together, because it's such a strong memory, when a husband and wife meet, that they just sense this connection. That memory would stay there for a long time, and so the fact that they can't remember that would probably mean that the love is probably faded from the relationship, or that it wasn't there to begin with.
Yeah, so I just finished writing down my stuff, and I'd like to know where we are.
Okay. Page 44.
Page 44.
It's near the top.
And you guys were talking about how Mildred doesn't remember.
It's where they
We're talking about Montag, how he wouldn't cry if Mildred had died.
Yeah.
After a while, since she's so caught up with the little things that I guess her memory would start getting away. And since she's so in your apartment, disposing that I wouldn't really be able to communicate with her anymore. So he would also start to forget because he's like they're not even gonna be together anymore because she's not really there.
Yeah, my quote was on page 44. Yeah, at the top, the first paragraph, where it says, and he remembered thinking then that if she died, he was her and he wouldn't cry, for it would be the dying of an unknown, a street face, a newspaper image, and it was suddenly so very wrong that he had begun to cry, not at death, but at the thought of not crying at death. A silly empty man nearing a silly empty woman. And then my thought was, maybe he finally opened his eyes and realized that he doesn't have any feelings left for Mildred. And he was thinking like back to Clarice, and he was like, oh yeah, the dandelion was right, and I don't feel love for Mildred. So he started to cry like, then what have I been doing with all my time, just throwing it away and stuff.
So when you said that, you know how earlier we were having a conversation about how when he was questioning her about how did they meet and everything. So yeah, I think it's somewhere between that where it's like, you know how the government, again I'm going off of like they might have drugged their people to think a certain way and give them a profile. And I feel like he wouldn't cry, yeah, because he doesn't know her. His drugged mind is starting to like starting to open his eyes and realize like the way we're living is wrong, and he doesn't really like, he's starting to realize that the government made a profile for him and for his people and are making them follow rules that are wrong, you know. So when he says that he won't cry about Mildred dying, he really won't, because he doesn't know her, and the government he made that profile for them, and so they don't know each other, and he's starting to realize that, like that.
But yet again, you're going off of a prediction.
Oh yeah, but like, cause Clarice, yeah, she did that, and she was saying, it's cause you know how they said about the firemen that they that they all look similar to each other. That's why I keep thinking that that they might be all, that the government, they're pawns to a game, you know. Once.
I also had a thought on this and how when he said he wasn't going to cry for her, but just for the death of things, people, I think that what he means that, like I said a while ago, was that they're like strangers just living in the same house. So when he said he's crying not because of her, but because of death, and death, like, I know what he means, like death is like really sad, and people cry over people they don't know or things that happen around social media or society and stuff. And I think he's also crying because how he's living in the same house with her and she's dead, but he's not crying because he knows her personally as a relative or something. He's just dying. I mean, he's just crying. He's just crying because she's dead. And I think that's what he's trying to say in that sentence.
So he just like feels bad that she's dead, but not like he's not gonna miss her.
Yeah.
So just like, oh, he feels bad because the person's dying.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, their relationship isn't really like a relationship because they literally have no connection with each other at all. Because all she ever does is she's always on electronic things. She doesn't really think of his feelings, and he doesn't really think of hers until he started talking to Clarice, and that's when he opened up and he realized that he didn't love her.
I still feel like this is like sort of like The Giver, you know, like they're all giving, the government's like the main player, you know, and they're his minions, and they're choosing how they should live. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that all you need?
so, do you want to?